I was standing on the warm sand, the calm waves brushing my toes, when HOA Karen marched toward me with her sunglasses pushed high on her head like a crown. Her voice cut through the breeze like a loud alarm. "You, get off this beach right now. This access is for HOA members only." I didn't even have time to answer before she pointed straight at me like she was a traffic officer stopping a speeding truck. People around us stopped to watch. Kids building sandcastles froze. Even the seagulls went quiet. Then the shocking moment happened, the reason this whole story exists. Because right when she tried to kick me out, the deputy sheriff pulled up in his beach buggy, looked at Karen, then looked at me and burst into laughter. Not small giggles, full belly laugh. "Ma'am," he said, wiping tears from his eyes, "you're trying to remove the owner of the entire beachfront." The whole beach gasped. Karen's jaw fell open like she'd swallowed a crab, and just when she tried to talk again, everything suddenly stopped. The deputy's radio crackled loudly, and he turned toward the far end of the beach with a shocked face. "Wait, what on earth is happening down there?" Everyone looked. Loud yelling came from behind the rocks. Something was going very wrong. People started shouting and running. I did too. And just as I raced toward the chaos, the worst thing I'd seen all day appeared. A huge crowd gathering around something or someone. And that's where everything changed. Now let me tell you how all of this began. Before I ever owned a grain of sand on that sunny beach, before HOA Karen ever screamed at me, before the deputy laughed till he nearly fell off his buggy, I was just a simple guy named Daniel who wanted a quiet life near the ocean. I didn't grow up with much money. My mom used to take me to the public beach once a month when she had a bit of spare cash. I loved it. The smell of the salt, the warm sun on my face, the way the waves whispered secrets, it felt like the ocean was hugging me. So when I finally got old enough to buy my own home, I promised myself I'd live somewhere close to water. Not luxury, just peace. Just a simple life where no one bothered me, no one shouted orders at me, and no one tried to control where I could walk or stand. But life has funny ways of testing you. Because the house I found was beautiful, fresh paint, open windows, and a tiny path that led straight to a quiet beach. But the neighborhood came with something I didn't expect to be so controlling, an HOA. I didn't know much about HOAs then. I thought they were just a group of neighbors who made sure the area looked nice. I didn't know some HOAs acted like kingdoms and some HOA board members acted like rulers. And I definitely didn't know that one of the most powerful voices in this HOA was Karen. Her real name was something long and fancy, but everyone called her Karen because she acted exactly like one. She had short blonde hair that bounced when she marched around yelling at people. She carried a clipboard everywhere. She wore sunglasses even when the sun wasn't out, and she talked like she was the queen of the sidewalks, the streets, the air, and apparently the beach too. The first time I met her was the day I moved in. I was carrying boxes into the house, sweating like crazy, when she stormed up the driveway chanting, "No, no, no, you can't put the moving truck there. It blocks the view. You must move it right now." I looked around to see if she was talking to someone else, but nope. She was looking right at me. I tried to smile. "Hi, I'm Daniel, just moved in." She didn't even blink. "Truck, move now." That was when I knew life in this neighborhood was not going to be calm, not even close. Still, I tried to be kind. I always believed kindness is stronger than anger. My mom taught me that. She always said, people behave in loud ways because their hearts are quiet and lonely. So instead of fighting back, I said, "Sure, I'll move it." And I did. But that didn't stop Karen. Over the next few days, she found something new to complain about every single morning. "Your recycling bin is too close to the road. Your curtains are not HOA approved. That welcome mat is too bright. Your flowers are planted 1 inch too far left." It was like she had a radar that beeped every time I took a breath. Another neighbor whispered to me one day, "Don't take it personal. She's like that with everyone who isn't part of her little group." Her group was 3 ladies who walked around the neighborhood like a snobby parade. They nodded at each other in slow motion like queens waving at peasants. They never smiled at anyone, only smirked. Now here, where things slowly got worse. One morning, I decided to walk down the short path from my house to the beach. I had a small towel over my shoulder and a bottle of water in my hand. I just wanted a calm moment. But guess who appeared from behind a palm tree like a villain in a cartoon? Karen. Where do you think you're going? She snapped. To the beach. Not through this access point. This path is for HOA members only. I blinked. I am an HOA member. I live here. She folded her arms like a cobra preparing to strike. Not yet. You haven't passed the HOA new member orientation. Orientation for walking to the beach. You can't use this path until you're approved, she declared, stepping in front of the entrance like a guard dog. I took a slow breath. Ma'am, this path starts on my land. She gasped dramatically, as if I said something illegal. Your land? Oh, please. The HOA owns everything here. Even the birds know that. I thought she was joking. She was. And that was the moment I decided I needed to check something important: property lines. A few days later, after a very long talk with the county land office, followed by paperwork, phone calls, a visit from a surveyor, and a lot of thinking, I made the biggest, craziest, boldest purchase of my entire life. Something so huge that the deputy sheriff would later laugh when Karen tried kicking me out. But I wasn't ready to reveal it yet, not until everything was official. I didn't care about showing off. I just wanted peace. I just wanted kindness. I just wanted people to stop acting like kings and queens over things that didn't belong to them. But Karen didn't know that. She kept pushing. Every day she found something else to yell at me about. And the more she pushed, the more determined I became to protect my peace and protect the beach access I knew was rightfully connected to my home. Days passed, then weeks, then the first storm rolled in. This is where things shifted. One windy evening, as I walked home from the grocery store, I saw a strange light near the beach path. It flickered like fire. People were shouting. Someone screamed, "Help." I dropped my bags and ran. The waves were high, the wind was strong, the sky was dark. And right there, right by the rocks, something dangerous was happening. Something that made my heart pound so hard I felt it in my throat. An extreme event that would change everything from that moment forward. Because lying on the sand and surrounded by panicked neighbors was someone who desperately needed help. And I was the first to reach them. Where are you watching from? The wind pushed against me as I ran toward the rocks, my shoes slipping in the wet sand. The sky had turned a deep gray, and the waves were crashing harder than before, each one sounding like a drumbeat warning us of danger. People were crowding around someone lying on the ground, calling for help, crying, panicking. I pushed through gently, trying not to bump anyone, and when I reached the center of the circle, my heart dropped. It was an old man, thin, gray-haired, and shaking like he had no strength left at all. His skin was pale, and his eyes were half open, staring up at the stormy sky. A little girl stood next to him, tears pouring down her face as she tried to shake his arm. "Grandpa, wake up," she cried. "Please wake up." Everything inside me tightened. Fear, worry, and something else, something that felt like a pull from deep inside my chest. I knelt beside him and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" But he didn't respond. His breathing was shallow, weak, scary weak. The neighbors didn't know what to do. Some were frozen, some were stepping backward, some were mumbling about calling 911, but no one actually moved to do it. Karen wasn't there, probably hiding from the storm, but for once I wished she was. Anyone could have helped in that moment. Everyone was scared. I took a deep breath and pushed my fear away. "Someone call the emergency number right now," I shouted, louder than I ever had. That finally made people jump into action. A woman grabbed her phone and dialed. A man took off his jacket and handed it to me so I could cover the old man. A few others tried to calm the crying little girl. The storm kept growing stronger. The wind whipped sand into our faces. Thunder rumbled closer each second. I leaned down and spoke softly. "Stay with us, okay? Help is coming." I didn't know if he could hear me. I didn't know anything except that this man needed more help than what my words could give. Minutes felt like hours. The paramedics finally arrived, running fast and dropping their equipment next to him. One of them knelt beside me and said, "Good job keeping him warm. We've got it from here." They checked his breathing, his pulse, and then lifted him onto a stretcher. The little girl clung to his hand until they gently pulled her aside. As they carried him away, the girl grabbed my shirt. "You helped him," she whispered, crying softly. "Thank you." Those two small words hit me harder than any storm. In that moment, I understood something important. Life wasn't just about peace or quiet or escaping people like Karen. It was about being there for others when they needed kindness the most. And sometimes, kindness was the strongest thing you could give. The storm continued to roar, so we all headed home. I walked slowly, thinking about the old man and hoping he'd be okay. My clothes were soaked, my shoes squished with each step, but inside I felt strangely warm. Doing something good changes you, even if you don't realize it in the moment. But peace didn't last long. The next morning, when the storm had passed and the sun came back shining bright, I walked outside to check the path leading to the beach. The ground was wet, branches were scattered everywhere, and the waves were still rough. I was thinking about the old man, wondering if he was safe, when I heard the unmistakable sound of angry footsteps marching straight toward me. I didn't even have to look, I knew who it was. Karen. She stomped toward me with her sunglasses pushed up like she was ready to start a fight before breakfast. Her hair was messy from the wind, and her face was red, not from sunburn, but from pure, boiling anger. "You," she screamed, "I've been looking for you." I blinked. "Good morning." "Don't good morning me," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stared at her confused. What did I do? Save a man's life, stand in the rain, breathe. She pointed at the beach path with shaking hands. Look at this. Do you see the footprints? Do you see the sand? Do you see the mess?" Her voice echoed through the neighborhood like a fire alarm. "People tracked sand everywhere because you let strangers walk through last night." My eyes widened. That wasn't even close to what happened. She wasn't there. She didn't see the emergency. She didn't hear the cries. She didn't help anyone. "Karen," I said slowly, "there was a medical emergency. A man collapsed. People needed help." I don't care," she shouted. "The rules are the rules. Beach access is for HOA members only. You have broken regulations, and I will not tolerate it." A few neighbors peeked out from their doors. Some shook their heads, some sighed. They all knew how she was. Still, I tried to stay calm. "Someone almost died, Karen. I wasn't going to stop people from getting help." She leaned forward like she was about to explode. "And I don't care if the whole world collapses," she hissed. "You follow the HOA rules. You don't get to decide anything around here." That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in certainty. I had tried kindness. I had tried patience. I had tried understanding, but some people didn't want peace. They wanted power. And Karen was one of them. She raised her finger, pointing it straight in my face. "I'm reporting you. I'm giving you the highest fine possible, and soon you'll learn that I run this neighborhood." Then she said it, the words that pushed this whole story into the future chaos waiting for both of us. "You are not allowed to step foot on that beach ever again, and if you try, I'll have you removed." Her voice echoed around us. But before I could reply, before I could explain or defend myself, before I could remind her of the emergency, a sudden scream burst from behind us. A loud, terrified scream coming from the beach path. Everyone turned toward the sound. Something had happened again. The scream cut through the morning air like a knife. Karen froze, her mouth wide open, pointing toward the beach path. Her sunglasses slipped off her head and fell into the sand. The neighbors who had gathered outside their homes looked around, terrified, trying to figure out where it was coming from. I didn't hesitate. I ran straight toward the sound, my shoes squishing in the wet sand. The wind had calmed a little since yesterday's storm, but the waves were still wild, crashing against the shore and spraying salty water into the air. The sunlight bounced off the wet sand, making everything glisten like a million tiny diamonds. But I didn't notice the beauty. All I could hear was that scream, full of fear, and my mind raced with possibilities. As I got closer, I could see a group of kids huddled near a large driftwood log. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror. One of them was pointing toward the water. "It's in the water," the youngest shouted, voice trembling. "It's moving." I ran faster, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw it, a small dog, trapped between two jagged rocks at the edge of the waves. The poor animal was barking frantically, trying to climb out, but the waves kept knocking it back. Its fur was soaked, its little legs trembling, and its eyes looked straight into mine, as if begging for help. Without thinking, I dropped to my knees, trying to figure out how to reach it without falling in myself. The rocks were slippery and sharp, but I couldn't just stand there. I took a deep breath, focusing on the dog. "It's okay," I whispered, inching closer. "I've got you, you're safe." Karen, still standing on the path, started yelling again. Don't, you'll ruin the beach, you'll break the rules. I ignored her. Rules didn't matter when any life was in danger. Carefully, I extended my hand toward the dog. It growled softly, scared but desperate, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, it jumped into my arms. I held it close, feeling the tiny body shiver against me, and scrambled back to the shore. The crowd around us cheered softly, relieved. Karen's face had turned red, not from the sun but from fury. You think you're a hero, breaking all the HOA rules? This is my neighborhood. I will make you pay. I looked down at the dog, now safe, and smiled. Sometimes helping someone is more important than following rules, Karen. She sputtered, speechless. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked toward my house, the little dog tucked safely under my arm. Some neighbors whispered and pointed, others just shook their heads. But one thing was clear. Karen had lost control of the situation, and she didn't know how to handle it. That evening, after the dog had calmed down and I had returned it to its grateful owner, I sat on my porch looking out at the ocean. The waves were calmer now, but the events of the day had left me thinking deeply. Kindness, empathy, and courage, they weren't just words. They were actions that mattered. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant standing up for life itself, even when people like Karen tried to control everything. The next few days passed with a strange quiet over the neighborhood. Karen didn't approach me directly, but I could feel her eyes everywhere. Watching, waiting, planning. I knew it was only a matter of time before she would try something bigger, something that would challenge me in a way the small arguments and threats never had. During that time, I began to finalize the paperwork for the beachfront property. I had always dreamed of owning land near the water, not to brag, not to dominate, but to protect it. To protect the people who needed it, the animals who lived near it, and the families who deserved a safe place to enjoy the beach. Every form, every signature, every meeting with the county officials brought me closer to that dream. I also started talking to the neighbors more, sharing small acts of kindness. I helped an elderly lady carry groceries up the stairs to her house. I fixed a broken fence for another neighbor who couldn't manage it alone. I left fresh flowers on the porch of a family who had lost a pet. Slowly, people started smiling, waving, and even thanking me. A few kids ran up to the beach path just to tell me hello. It was a small sense of victory, but it felt real. But Karen, she was like a storm cloud refusing to leave the sky. One afternoon, while I was planting new flowers near my front yard, I saw her marching down the path, her face twisted in determination. She was carrying a stack of papers, which I immediately recognized as fines, warnings, or some other HOA weapon. "Daniel," she shouted, "you think you can ignore the rules forever? I've got evidence now, proof that you're violating every regulation in this neighborhood." I stood and wiped my hands on my pants. "Karen, we both know there's more to life than rules. There's kindness, empathy, and doing what's right. You should try it sometime." Her face grew even redder, if that was even possible, and she slammed the papers onto the ground. "You will see. I will make sure that beach is off limits to you forever. And this time, I have the law on my side." I bent down, picked up the papers, and glanced through them quickly. Most of them were laughable. Rules about lawn height, mailbox color, and trash bin placement. Nothing serious, nothing that could really stop me, unless, of course, she had more tricks up her sleeve. And that was when I noticed it. At the very bottom of the stack of papers, an official-looking envelope with a county seal. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen this before. I opened it carefully. Inside was a notice about a property dispute. Someone was challenging the ownership of the beach. Someone claiming it wasn't mine. And the handwriting, it was Karen's. My stomach twisted. She wasn't just angry. She was ready to go all the way, to push for something that could change everything I had worked for. I looked up at her, and she was already marching back toward her car, muttering threats. Her eyes were sharp, filled with the kind of fury that promised a battle. I knew at that moment that the real fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And then, from the end of the beach path, I heard a strange sound, a rumble, low and deep, like something massive was moving. Before I could react, a huge shadow appeared on the sand, moving toward us faster than I could understand. Karen froze, the neighbors gasped, and I realized with a sinking feeling that whatever this was, it was going to change everything again. The shadow on the sand was massive. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst through my chest. The neighbors scattered in all directions, screaming, stumbling over beach chairs, towels, and driftwood. Karen, frozen in place, her clipboard clutched tightly in one hand, looked as if she had seen a ghost. I squinted against the sun reflecting off the water and sand, trying to figure out what was moving so fast. It wasn't a person, it was bigger, much bigger. My mind raced. Could it be a piece of debris from the storm, a stray boat, or something far worse? The shadow reached the shoreline, and I could see now that it was a truck, a massive construction truck, roaring across the sand, tires kicking up sand in every direction. But something didn't make sense. It was coming straight toward Karen and the beach path. Its engine roared like a wild animal, louder than the waves themselves. "Move," I yelled, pointing at her. "Get out of the way." She didn't move. She seemed frozen, staring at the truck like it had hypnotized her. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life, grabbing her arm and yanking her sideways just as the truck skidded past us, sand spraying like a curtain. She screamed, clinging to me for balance. What is happening?" she stammered. "I don't know, but we're alive. That's what matters," I shouted back, my own heart racing. The truck didn't stop. It roared up the beach, straight toward the driftwood log where the kids had been playing yesterday, now abandoned, thankfully. The driver was hidden behind dark-tinted windows, but I could see the outline of someone leaning forward, moving with intent. Something about it felt personal, as if the truck itself carried anger. I had no time to think about the why yet. First, we had to survive. I grabbed Karen's hand and ran toward the rocks, trying to find shelter. The waves were higher now, crashing against the rocks and sending salty water into my face. I could barely see, could barely breathe, but I kept running, keeping her close. Then I saw it, a small opening between two boulders, just wide enough for the both of us. I shoved Karen inside first, then followed, pressing her against the wall of stone to keep from being hit by flying sand and pebbles. The truck roared past, missing us by inches. My ears were ringing, my heart racing, adrenaline pumping through every vein. We stayed in the small alcove, watching as the truck continued down the beach, kicking up sand and leaving deep tire tracks in its wake. Karen was shaking, her face pale, her sunglasses hanging crookedly from her hair. I can't believe that just happened," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crashing waves. I exhaled slowly. "Neither can I, but it's over for now. Let's just stay calm." She looked at me, her eyes wide, and for a moment I thought I saw something different in them. Not fear, not anger, but shock, confusion, maybe even a tiny spark of respect, or at least acknowledgement that life was bigger than her rules. The neighbors who had fled were cautiously emerging from behind sand dunes and rocks, pointing and whispering. Some were laughing nervously, some were crying. A few were shaking their heads in disbelief. The beach, normally calm and inviting, had turned into a scene from an action movie. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the truck finally disappeared, leaving nothing but deep tire tracks and scattered sand in its wake. But the shock hadn't worn off. People were still staring, whispering, trying to process what had just happened. Karen finally spoke, her voice shaky. That was insane." "Yes," I said quietly, "it was, but we're okay, everyone's okay, and that's what matters." For the next few days, the neighborhood was tense. The truck had vanished, the driver unknown. No one had seen him leave. No one had called the authorities. And yet, everyone kept glancing toward the beach path as if expecting another surprise. I used the calm after the storm to continue my plans. I finalized the paperwork for the beachfront property, making sure everything was official. Surveyors came, lawyers visited, and I signed every form carefully, thinking about what it meant to protect this land, to protect the people who truly needed it, and to prevent chaos from repeating. During this time, Karen didn't speak to me directly. She watched from a distance, fuming quietly, but I noticed something small change. A few times, I caught her helping a neighbor pick up trash from the path or holding a door open for someone. Small things, tiny acts of kindness she didn't realize were noticed. I didn't point them out. I just smiled quietly, hoping the lesson would sink in. The next morning, when the sun rose over the calm waves, I walked down to the beach path alone. I wanted to clear my mind, enjoy the sand, and think about how far this neighborhood had come. Kids were playing safely, neighbors were chatting, and the waves whispered softly. But as I reached the path, I noticed something strange, deep footprints in the sand, leading straight toward my house. They were fresh, larger than normal shoes, heavy, deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. Someone had been there, someone was coming again. I bent down, following the tracks carefully. They led past the driftwood, past the dunes, and toward the edge of the beach where the rocks met the water. And then I saw it, another envelope, half buried in the sand. I picked it up carefully. The seal was official, My stomach twisted. It wasn't just another HOA threat this time, it was something bigger, something that could change everything. I opened it slowly, my hands shaking slightly. The words inside made my eyes widen, my pulse quicken, and my stomach drop. It wasn't Karen, not yet, but whoever had sent this, they knew everything. They knew about the beachfront, the disputes, the past storms, and the tension between Karen and me. And the last line of the letter made my blood run cold. You think you own the beach, you don't know what's coming next. A shadow moved behind me. I turned quickly and froze. Where are you watching from? The shadow behind me stretched long in the early morning sun. I turned slowly, my heart hammering in my chest, and saw a figure emerging from the dunes. At first, I couldn't make out who it was. Tall, wearing a hoodie, hands in pockets, moving silently, like they had been watching me for hours. My stomach churned with unease. The letter, the fresh footprints, and now this person, everything felt like it was closing in. I straightened my back, trying to appear calm, though I knew calm was impossible. Who's there? I called out. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. The figure didn't answer, just kept walking toward me slowly, deliberately, leaving new footprints in the sand. From the corner of my eye, I saw Karen creeping behind a dune, peeking out like a cat who had just discovered something she shouldn't. Her face was pale, her lips pressed together in tight anger. She didn't move closer. She didn't say anything. She just watched, silent but seething. I took a cautious step backward, keeping my hands free. I don't know what you want, but leave now. You've got the wrong person. The figure stopped a few feet away. The hood dropped back slightly, revealing a stranger's face. A man, maybe mid-30s, rugged, with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. He held something in his hand, a small notebook, or maybe a folder. You're Daniel, right? He said. His voice was calm but carried a weight that made me want to shrink back. The one who owns the beach. I nodded cautiously. Yes, but I don't know who you are or why you're here. He smiled faintly, just the corners of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm here to warn you. You think Karen is the only problem? She's just the beginning. There are people who don't want you to have that beachfront. People who will do whatever it takes to take it from you. My stomach dropped. I felt a cold wave pass over me. I had been focusing on Karen, on her small threats, on the chaos she caused. I hadn't realized how vulnerable I really was. The beachfront was beautiful, peaceful, a place of joy, but now it felt like a prize in a dangerous game I didn't even know I was playing. Before I could respond, he continued, you need to be careful. Protect your land, protect the people who need it, and watch every step you take. Someone's planning something big, something that will shake this entire neighborhood. I swallowed hard. How do you know all this? Who are you? He glanced toward the ocean for a moment, then back at me. Let's just say, I've seen what happens when people think they can take what doesn't belong to them. I've been watching the situation here for weeks. You need to be ready. I felt a chill run down my spine. Weeks. Weeks of someone watching, waiting, and now stepping out just to warn me. I wanted to ask more, demand more, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't going to give any more answers. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the direction of the dunes. I spun around. Karen was yelling again, pointing toward the water. The tide is coming in faster than ever. I glanced toward the shoreline. The waves had grown taller than I'd ever seen, slamming against the rocks and swirling in strange patterns. The wind picked up, stronger than the day of the storm. Sand blew into my face, stinging my eyes. People from the neighborhood were running, trying to gather children, pets, anything they could. The small beach had transformed into a chaotic scene, and in the middle of it all, the tide seemed almost alive, moving with intent, reaching higher and higher. The man in the hoodie stepped closer, his voice cutting through the roar of the wind. Daniel, move, now, you need to get everyone to safety. This isn't just a normal tide. Something unnatural is happening. I didn't hesitate. I ran toward the crowd, calling out instructions, helping families gather children and dogs, pointing toward higher ground. Karen tried to argue, we don't need to leave. This is the beach, my rules. I grabbed her arm again, dragging her along. Listen, right now it's not about rules, it's about staying alive. The waves hit with shocking force, spraying sand and water over everything. Some people stumbled, others screamed. The wind tore hats from heads, blew chairs over, and scattered belongings across the wet sand. I felt myself slipping in the wet ground, but I kept moving, pulling Karen and others with me. From the corner of my eye, I noticed the man in the hoodie. He was moving toward a group of stranded neighbors, hitting them with calm authority, like he knew exactly what needed to be done. I realized then that whoever he wasn't just a messenger. He was a protector, someone who had come to make sure people didn't get hurt. As the tide continued to surge, the chaos grew. The waves crashed higher, spraying into the dunes. Karen was screaming, finally realizing that her power didn't matter in the face of nature. Neighbors were running, shouting, helping each other. And through it all, I kept my focus on the children, the elderly, the people who couldn't protect themselves. And just when I thought the worst might pass, I saw a large shadow in the water. Something massive, moving faster than the waves, heading straight toward the cluster of people still struggling to reach safety. Time seemed to freeze, my heart jumped, Karen gasped, the neighbors screamed. I knew in that instant that we were about to face the most dangerous event yet. Something bigger than rules, bigger than threats, bigger than Karen's anger. And it was coming for us all. Where are you watching from? The shadow in the water moved fast, faster than the waves themselves, cutting through the surf like a predator. My chest tightened, every nerve in my body screaming that something terrible was about to happen. I shouted for everyone to move back, but the crowd was panicked, some frozen in place, others too terrified to listen. Karen was screaming again, pointing at the water like she could stop it by yelling louder. I sprinted toward the cluster of people closest to the waves. The children were crying, holding onto their parents, clutching sand-covered toys. An elderly couple had fallen on the wet sand, struggling to get up as water began to lap at their feet. My adrenaline surged, and I pushed myself forward, shouting instructions, grabbing arms, pulling them to safety. The man in the hoodie moved beside me, quick and precise, hitting the neighbors, moving children out of harm's way, and helping the elderly to their feet. I didn't know who he was, but at that moment, I trusted him completely. He had a calm authority that cut through the chaos. Even Karen seemed to falter, her face pale, her mouth open in panic. The shadow surged closer, and then I saw it clearly. Not a boat, not a piece of debris, but a massive sandbar, or maybe a rogue wave forming out of nowhere, rushing toward the beach. The water twisted unnaturally, higher than any wave I had ever seen, curling like a giant arm reaching for the shore. People screamed as it neared, stumbling backward, slipping in the wet sand. I grabbed Karen by the arm again. "Move, now," I shouted. For once, she obeyed without resistance. She stumbled, almost falling, but I held her up. Her clipboard flew out of her hand, tumbling into the surf. She barely noticed. The waves slammed into the beach with terrifying force. Sand and water sprayed into the air, knocking people off their feet. I was pushed backward, my shoes sinking into the wet sand, my arms wrapped around Karen and a small child who had slipped into my path. We tumbled together, sand and water covering us. Through the roar of the wave, I heard screaming, shouting, and the crack of branches breaking. Some neighbors were struggling to get up. Others were holding onto each other, trying to stay upright as the water dragged at their feet. My lungs burned from yelling, my arms ached from holding onto people, but I kept going. The man in the hoodie shouted instructions over the chaos. "Everyone, follow me to the dunes. Move now, stay together." We scrambled, helping the struggling, getting the frightened, pushing against the force of the water. Karen, who had been so angry before, was now silent, her face pale as she held onto a neighbor's arm for support. I realized she was seeing the truth. The world didn't care about HOA rules. Nature didn't care about anger or power. Survival mattered, and in that moment, we were all equal. As we climbed the dunes, the wave crashed behind us, leaving a trail of debris, chairs, umbrellas, signs, and even a few surfboards tossed like toys. People gasped, catching their breath, looking back in disbelief at what had just happened. I held the small child close, checking to make sure everyone around me was okay. Karen finally spoke, her voice shaking. I didn't know it was real," she trailed off, staring at the wet, sand-covered beach. Her pride, her anger, her obsession with rules, all of it seemed to crumble in the face of what we had just survived. I didn't answer her. Words felt useless. Actions mattered. And in that moment, the only thing that mattered was helping people, keeping them safe, and staying calm amidst the chaos. The man in the hoodie moved past us, checking on everyone, making sure the elderly couple and the children were all right. I wanted to ask him who he was, why he knew how to handle this, but there wasn't time. There was always more to do. By mid-morning, the beach was quiet again, except for the sound of water washing back into the ocean. Debris was scattered across the sand, some still floating in small pools of water. People were exhausted, covered in sand and wet clothes, but they were alive. Everyone was accounted for, and though Karen hadn't spoken a word to me, I could feel a shift in her. Something inside her had changed. I took a deep breath, letting the salty air fill my lungs. I looked out at the beach, at the waves calming, and at the people slowly gathering their things. This was my home, my land, my responsibility, and no angry HOA member, no threat, no massive wave would take that away from me. But the letter, the stranger, the threats, everything that had started weeks ago was far from over. Whoever had sent that warning wasn't done. Someone was still watching. Someone was still planning. I looked at Karen. She avoided my eyes, shuffling away toward the neighborhood path. But I saw her glance back at me, and for a moment I thought I saw respect, or maybe fear, maybe both. And then a new sound broke the calm. A loud, metallic crash echoed from the far end of the beach. Everyone froze. Some people ran toward the noise, others stepped back, unsure of what it was. My heart raced. I started running toward it. The man in the hoodie followed close behind. Karen hesitated, but then followed at a distance. When we reached the source of the noise, my stomach dropped. A large crane, massive, industrial, and completely out of place on our beach, was tilting dangerously. Its base had been set too close to the sand, probably loosened by the storm, and now it was swaying. Attached to it was a huge metal container, threatening to fall onto the beach. People screamed. I grabbed the first person I could and pulled them back. The crane tilted further, its shadow stretching across the sand like a giant hand. And then, before anyone could react further, the container slipped from the crane, tumbling toward the beach with a deafening crash. The metal container crashed onto the sand with a deafening roar, throwing debris everywhere. A cloud of sand and dust rose like smoke from a fire, making it impossible to see. People screamed, running in every direction. Some stumbled and fell, their hands digging into the wet sand as they tried to pull themselves upright. Others were dragged back by the tide, their feet slipping in the water as they tried to escape the flying debris. Karen was screaming hysterically, pointing at the container. "This is your fault. You let it happen. You're supposed to protect this beach." I grabbed her arm again, pulling her behind a large boulder. "Karen, stop shouting. We need to move." The man in the hoodie was already assessing the situation. He ran toward the container, carefully dodging the scattered pieces of metal and sand. I followed him, helping wherever I could, getting neighbors to safety, shouting instructions. His voice cut through the chaos like a beacon. "Everyone stay low, move away from the edges, help each other." The container had landed at an angle, tilted, almost like it had frozen mid-fall. I could see that if it shifted again, it could crush anyone nearby. Children were crying, their parents trying to calm them while keeping them safe from flying debris. The wind was picking up again, whipping sand into our faces and stinging our eyes. The waves continued to crash against the shoreline, higher than ever, as if the ocean itself had joined in the chaos. I ran closer to the container, my heart hammering. A large piece of metal had broken off and was precariously balanced, threatening to fall at any second. I could hear Karen screaming, but her words were just background noise now. There was no time for blame, no time for arguments. Only action mattered. The man in the hoodie called out, "We need to stabilize it. Gather anything heavy, rocks, boards, anything." I scanned the beach quickly. People were already helping, neighbors lifting pieces of driftwood rocks, even sandbags from their homes. Karen, surprisingly, started picking up heavy boards and throwing them near the container's base. She moved quickly, efficiently, almost like someone else had taken over her body. "Keep your weight low, work together," I shouted, directing the group. The container wobbled slightly, and a collective gasp rose from the crowd. But the boards and rocks we had placed began to hold it steady. The man in the hoodie motioned for me to step closer. "Daniel, we need to push it together now, just a few inches at a time." I nodded, bracing myself against the rough metal. The container was cold, slick with seawater, and heavy beyond belief. A group of neighbors joined me, including Karen, who didn't say a word but worked tirelessly, her anger replaced with focus. We pushed and pushed, straining against the weight, every muscle in my body burning. The sand shifted beneath us, making it harder, but step by step, inch by inch, we moved the container to a safer position. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, it stopped moving. The container settled on a patch of firmer sand, no longer threatening anyone. Everyone let out a collective sigh of relief, collapsing onto the dunes, panting, covered in sweat, sand, and seawater. Some were crying, some were laughing nervously, but all of us were alive. Karen, sitting on the sand, looked at me for the first time without yelling. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. You saved people," she whispered. "Even with all this chaos, you kept them alive." I nodded slowly, still catching my breath. It wasn't just me, everyone helped. That's what matters. Rules don't matter when lives are at risk. For a moment she was silent, staring at the waves, the sand, the debris. Then she muttered, almost to herself, "Maybe I've been wrong." The man in the hoodie came over, checking on everyone, helping some of the older neighbors to their feet. "Good work," he said quietly. "You all did well, but this isn't over. Whoever sent that letter, they're planning something more." I froze, my mind raced. The stranger, the letter, the threats, the chaos, it all pointed to something bigger, something dangerous. And now, after surviving the waves, the storm, and the crane incident, it seemed like the next event would be even worse. The beach was quiet now, but only on the surface. The air still hummed with tension. People were shaking, brushing sand off their clothes, whispering to each other, realizing how close they had come to disaster. Karen sat alone, staring at the horizon, her pride shattered but something in her demeanor shifting, as if she was beginning to understand what responsibility truly meant. I walked along the edge of the beach, inspecting the damage. Chairs were broken, umbrellas torn apart, driftwood scattered, and the sand littered with footprints. Some of us had survived, some had been carried by the water, all changed by what had just happened. I looked down at the footprints leading to my house. Someone had been here again, leaving marks, a warning, a message. Whoever was orchestrating this chaos wasn't finished yet. And then I noticed a small figure moving toward the dunes. A child, alone, holding something small and wet in their hands. As I approached, I realized it was a sealed envelope, similar to the one in the sand earlier. My pulse quickened. Another message, another warning. I opened it carefully. Inside was a simple note, but the words made my blood run cold. "The beachfront is not yours. Prepare for what comes next." A shadow moved behind me. I turned quickly, heart pounding. The man in the hoodie was there again, eyes sharp, scanning the beach. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone reminded me that danger was not done. The next extreme event was coming, bigger, more dangerous, and I knew we had only just begun to fight for this place. The note burned in my hand, its simple words echoing in my mind. "The beachfront is not yours. Prepare for what comes next." I looked up at the calm waves, but beneath their gentle rhythm, I felt the pulse of something darker, a danger lurking just beyond the horizon. The beach was quiet now. The neighbors slowly recovering from the chaos, but I knew that silence was a fragile mask. Karen was sitting on a dune, hunched over, her clipboard abandoned in the sand. For the first time, she didn't yell, didn't argue. She just stared at the horizon, her face pale and drawn. I walked over to her cautiously. "Karen," I said, my voice soft, "this isn't about rules anymore. It's about protecting people." She looked at me, eyes wide, haunted by the recent events. I didn't realize the beach. It's more than just sand and rules," she whispered. "I didn't know it could be this dangerous." I nodded slowly, feeling a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point for her. It's about responsibility, Karen. It's about understanding that the world doesn't follow the rules you make. It's about caring for others. The man in the hoodie approached, his presence commanding attention even in the soft morning light. "Daniel," he said, voice steady, "you've survived storms, waves, and chaos so far, but what's coming next is bigger. The person behind this, they're planning something extreme. You need to be ready, and you need allies." I swallowed hard, my mind raced. The stranger had appeared just in time during the last wave, during the crane incident, guiding us, protecting us. Who was he really, and how much did he know about the person orchestrating these events? Before I could ask, a sharp noise cut through the air, a metallic screech from the far end of the beach. I turned instinctively, heart hammering. A massive shadow moved over the dunes. At first, I thought it was another crane or construction vehicle, but then I saw it, a giant bulldozer, dark and ominous, moving toward the beachfront. Its engine roared like a wild animal, and the ground shook beneath its weight. The neighbors screamed, scattering in every direction. Karen jumped to her feet, yelling something incomprehensible. I grabbed her arm again. "Move, back to the dunes." The man in the hoodie was already assessing the situation, running toward the bulldozer with a determined stride. "We need to stop it from reaching the beach houses. Everyone else, help people to safety." I ran alongside him, helping neighbors climb higher onto the dunes. The bulldozer barreled forward, destroying everything in its path: beach umbrellas, chairs, small boats, even the remnants of the crane's metal container from the previous chaos. The sand flew into the air, blinding us, stinging our faces. I could hear the roar of the engine over the crashing waves and the screams of the people around me. Karen was still shouting, pointing at the bulldozer. This is insane. You can't stop it." I didn't answer. There was no time for words. We had to act. I scanned the beach, looking for anything we could use to halt its advance. Rocks, driftwood, anything heavy or sturdy. A group of neighbors had already begun piling debris in front of the machine, but it was massive, unstoppable, and moving too fast. The man in the hoodie shouted instructions. Form a line, push, use ropes if you have them, slow it down. We ran into position, tying together whatever ropes we could find, pulling and heaving against the machine. The bulldozer groaned and rumbled as it struck the obstacles, throwing sand and debris into the air. The neighbors screamed, trying to hold their ground, and Karen, surprisingly, grabbed a rope and joined the line. Her anger from before had turned into sheer determination. Step by step, we managed to slow it down. Inch by inch, the bulldozer's forward motion decreased. I felt every muscle in my body burn, my hands raw from the ropes, my arms trembling from exertion. The man in the hoodie coordinated the effort, moving quickly to reinforce weak points, shouting encouragement, and directing our efforts with precision. Finally, with one last combined push, the bulldozer ground to a halt, its massive engine growling as if furious at being stopped. The entire beach was covered in sand, debris, and tire tracks, but for the first time since the chaos began, we had a moment of victory. People collapsed, exhausted but alive. Karen sank to her knees, panting, her face wet with sweat and sand. She looked at me, her expression unreadable, somewhere between fear, disbelief, and respect. The man in the hoodie approached me nodding. You've survived again, Daniel, but this is far from over. Whoever sent those letters, whoever orchestrated the bulldozer, they're not done. And next time, it may not be a machine. It may not be something we can stop with strength alone. I looked out at the ruined beach, the overturned chairs, the broken umbrellas, and the scattered debris. My mind raced. I had survived storms, waves, crane incidents, and now a bulldozer attack. But the pattern was clear. Someone was targeting me, my beachfront, and my community. And the next event, whatever it was, would be the most extreme yet. Karen, still on her knees, finally whispered, I don't know what to do, but I'll help. I understand now. I nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. Good, that's all that matters. We'll face this together. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about her anymore. The real threat was still out there, watching, waiting, planning. The next attack would be sudden, dangerous, and unlike anything we had faced so far. And from the dunes, I saw movement, a dark figure slipping back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared before. The man in the hoodie's presence reassured me, but his eyes betrayed the same tension I felt. The final challenge was coming, and there was no telling if we were ready. The night fell over the beachfront quietly, but the calm was deceptive. The day had left the beach in ruins, upturned sand, debris scattered across every inch, broken chairs and umbrellas lying half buried in sand, but no one dared go near the water. The tide had calmed, but the energy in the air was heavy, almost electric, as if the ocean itself had witnessed what had happened and held its breath for what was coming next. I stood on my porch, looking out at the dark horizon, the waves illuminated faintly by the moonlight. Karen was nearby, silent, sitting on a bench that had survived the day's chaos. She didn't say much, only occasionally glancing toward the water with a mixture of fear and understanding. I knew she had changed. I could see it in her eyes, the stubbornness replaced with a cautious respect for life beyond rules. The man in the hoodie approached, his footsteps soft on the sand. Daniel, he said quietly, tonight may be the most dangerous yet. Whoever is orchestrating this, they've learned from each attempt. Each extreme event was a warning, a test. Tonight they escalate. I swallowed hard. My muscles ached from the day's efforts. My mind was heavy with exhaustion and worry. What do you mean? What could they possibly do next? He looked toward the horizon, his eyes scanning the dark waves. This isn't about machines or storms anymore. They're coming closer. They know what you've done to protect the beach. They want to strike where it hurts the most. And this time, it's personal. I shivered, realizing that every moment I thought we were safe, we were only one step away from disaster. Karen, sensing my tension, finally spoke. Daniel, I don't know if I can help, but I don't want anyone else to get hurt, not after today. I nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You've already helped. Just being aware, staying ready, that's enough. We all have to be ready. The night deepened, and the wind began to pick up again, rustling the trees near the dunes. The ocean's waves grew louder, each crash against the shore sounding like a drumbeat in the dark. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was coming, something bigger than anything we had faced. Suddenly, a series of lights appeared on the horizon. At first, I thought it was a fishing boat or a patrol vessel. But as the lights drew closer, my stomach dropped. They weren't moving like a normal vessel. They glowed brighter, erratic, almost like fire on the water, and the shadows they cast on the waves danced and twisted unnaturally. Karen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What is that?" she whispered. I didn't answer immediately. My mind raced. Machines, rogue waves, letters, a bulldozer, and now this. It wasn't natural. It wasn't random. Whoever was behind this had planned everything meticulously. The lights grew closer, and I could see the shapes of floating structures, floating platforms, connected by cables and ropes, moving fast, glinting in the moonlight. The man in the hoodie's face was tense. "They've come," he said. "Get everyone back from the beach, now." I ran, shouting to the remaining neighbors who were still near the dunes. "Back to safety, everyone back, move quickly." Karen followed, helping direct families and children. I could see the panic in their eyes, the uncertainty, the fear. But this time, everyone obeyed immediately. The events of the previous days had taught them to listen, to act. From the shadows, I saw movement closer to my property line. Figures slipping silently, carrying ropes, pulleys, and equipment. Whoever they were organized, deliberate, and precise. My stomach twisted. This wasn't about intimidation anymore. They intended to take control, to force their will on the beach. I glanced at Karen, who was now helping a small child climb the dunes. Her face was determined, no longer full of fear. She was learning quickly. "We can't let them take this place," I said, more to myself than her. "We've protected it this long, we can't give up now." The man in the hoodie moved beside me again. "You need to act fast. Whatever they're planning, it's synchronized with the tide and the wind. If we don't act, the beachfront will be overrun." I realized then that the entire beach, the dunes, the paths, even the homes near the water were vulnerable. Every structure, every person, every inch of sand could be used against us. My mind raced through every plan, every possible defense. I thought about the previous events, the waves, the crane, the bulldozer, and knew that tonight's challenge would be unlike anything we had faced. Suddenly, a loud crashing sound echoed from the north end of the beach. A section of the dunes collapsed, sending sand tumbling down like a small landslide. Figures emerged from the moving sand, working quickly, placing equipment, preparing something I couldn't yet comprehend. Karen grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Daniel, what do we do now?" I looked at her, the neighbors, and the dark horizon, my mind a whirlwind of strategy and fear. "We fight smart," I said firmly. "We protect everyone. We hold the line. We can't let them win." The lights on the floating platforms drew closer, their shapes now distinct, metal frames, pulleys, ropes, and machines designed to control the beach. The waves splashed against them, but they didn't falter. Whoever had sent the letters, whoever had orchestrated the bulldozer, had brought something massive, coordinated, and unstoppable. The man in the hoodie placed a hand on my shoulder. "This is it," he said quietly. "Brace yourself. The real battle begins now." A loud whistle cut through the night, echoing across the dunes. The floating structures lurched forward, and a series of ropes and anchors shot out toward the beach. People screamed. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of waves crashing and metal clanging. I realized then, with a sinking feeling, that the final extreme event was about to hit. The ropes from the floating structures whipped across the beach like giant snakes, snapping against the sand and the scattered debris. The metal frames groaned under tension, and the platforms lurched forward, rocking violently with every wave. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might explode. I had faced storms, rogue machinery, and even the unpredictable wrath of the ocean itself. But this was different. It was organized, deliberate, and deadly. Whoever was behind it had studied everything we did, anticipated our movements, and now they were here to finish what they had started. "Everyone back," I shouted, my voice barely audible over the roar of the waves, the wind, and the metal scraping against sand and stone. Karen was beside me, helping families climb higher onto the dunes. Her hands were steady, her face pale but determined. I had to admit, it was the first time I'd seen her truly understand responsibility, truly care about others beyond her own petty grievances. The man in the hoodie moved like a shadow beside me, coordinating the efforts, getting people, pushing them to safety. "Daniel," he said, his voice calm but urgent, "we need to disrupt their anchors. If we can free the platforms from the beach, we might be able to stop them before they reach the houses." I nodded, scanning the area. The platforms were massive, bigger than anything I'd imagined. They had ropes anchored deep into the sand, pulleys, and makeshift machinery that made my stomach churn. Whoever built this had spent days, if not weeks, planning. My mind raced. How could a group like this have targeted our community so precisely? Karen tugged at my sleeve. What can I do? She asked, her voice steady now, without the usual edge of anger. She had changed. I could see the fear in her eyes, but it was tempered with focus. Anything, I'll help. I looked at her, then at the man in the hoodie. We need teams, one to cut or loosen the ropes, one to guide people back, and one to monitor the platforms. Everyone who can help needs to be organized. The man in the hoodie nodded. I'll take the ropes. You lead the evacuation. Karen, you assist Daniel with the people, quickly. I turned to the neighbors, still scattered across the dunes, many frightened and unsure. Listen, we have to work together. If we stay calm and follow instructions, we can get everyone safe. Move in groups, watch out for each other, and keep your eyes on the platforms. Let's go. The group split as we organized. Karen and I ran along the dunes, helping families descend safely, keeping children close. The platforms lurched again, ropes snapping and metal clanging. I could hear the panic in people's voices, the gasps, the shouts, and the cries of those still too close to the water. The wind carried the metallic screeching, the waves crashing, and the sound of the platforms moving closer to the houses. Meanwhile, the man in the hoodie moved like a force of nature. He scaled the platforms, cutting ropes with expert precision, loosening anchors, and signaling to us when a section was ready to collapse safely into the water. Every movement was deliberate, practiced, and calculated. I could see him giving instructions to neighbors brave enough to assist. It was a coordinated effort, a battle of wills against a seemingly unstoppable force. Karen grabbed a small child and helped him down from the dunes. It's okay, she said softly, calming him. We're getting everyone safe. Her transformation was complete. No longer the angry HOA enforcer, she was a protector, a guardian, a human shield for the frightened and vulnerable. I felt a surge of respect for her. Suddenly, one of the platforms lurched violently, throwing a rope against a nearby tree. The impact sent sand flying, narrowly missing a group of teenagers who had been assisting with the evacuation. I ran toward them, pulling them to safety, while the man in the hoodie continued his work on the platform. The floating machines creaked, groaned, and shifted under the pressure, but step by step, rope by rope, we were gaining control. I realized then that the attackers had underestimated us. They had assumed chaos would lead to disaster, that fear and disorganization would rule. But we were calm, focused, and determined. Every person helping, every rope loosened, every family moved to safety was a victory, a statement that we would not be defeated. As the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, the platforms were finally released. They toppled slowly into the ocean, their ropes snapping one by one, their weight dragging them away from the beach. The tide carried them out, and the danger was receding. The community had survived. We were battered, covered in sand, exhausted, but alive. Karen collapsed beside me, breathing heavily. I can't believe we did it, she whispered. All of this survived. I looked at her, at the neighbors still catching their breath, at the ruined but intact beach, and nodded. We did, together, that's what mattered, not rules, not power, together. The man in the hoodie approached, his face serious but with a faint smile. You did well, Daniel. You led them, kept calm, protected the people, and faced every extreme event with courage. But remember, threats will always come. It's not the battles that define us, but how we respond. I nodded, exhausted but relieved. For once, the beach was calm. The sun rose higher, painting the sand and waves in gold. The neighbors began helping each other clear debris, rebuilding what was lost. Even Karen helped, quietly, without complaint. She had learned empathy, responsibility, and the importance of working together. I looked out at the water, the floating machines now distant shadows on the horizon. The beach was mine to protect, but I knew vigilance was eternal. I knew challenges would come again. But for now, in this moment, we had survived. We had triumphed together. And the lesson was clear: kindness, courage, and unity could overcome even the most extreme threats. The man in the hoodie finally turned toward the dunes. I'll stay until the community is safe, he said. But remember, Daniel, every day is a chance to protect what you value and help those around you. I watched him disappear down the dunes, leaving the beach in relative peace. Karen stood beside me, brushing sand from her clothes, looking out at the horizon. Thank you, she said quietly. I nodded. No, we all did this together. That's the lesson. The sun fully rose over the beachfront, lighting up every corner. The waves sparkled, the sand glowed, and the neighbors began to rebuild. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on my face, the calm after chaos, and the satisfaction of survival and unity. And I knew, deep down, that no matter what came next, this community would face it together. Where are you watching from?